last night I was reminded yet again that everything that's wrong with the U.S. is rooted in racism, especially anti-blackness. So today I want to talk about tipping. So I have so much to say about this. I'm going to go over like a really amazing article that breaks all this down about the historical context of this. And as somebody who's like a history major, I love history because it teaches me why things are the way they are instead of me just being like, oh yeah, this is normal. I want to know why they are the way they are. And tipping in the United States is a legacy of slavery. And I was reminded of this last night because we went out for my friend's birthday. And one of the guys behind the bar or whatever was just like rude. And anybody who knows about like French restaurant culture, like if you come here, you are not here to be doted on and your butt kissed by anybody. They're not doing that here, and I love that for them. Like the former waitress in me. I mean, I waited tables on and off all through my 20s and through my 30s. That was literally the only way I could pay rent in LA was waitressing, and literally my doctor made me quit that job because it was destroying my body. I couldn't move my wrists anymore. I couldn't hold plates. Like that job is so hard. And when you're like 38 and you realize this physically demanding job where you're running, I don't know, like I think 10 miles a day around a restaurant, carrying heavy stuff and twisting your wrists and holding like I couldn't hold things anymore. I was like, okay, this is definitely not sustainable. And I only quit because I had to, because my body was literally just like protesting. And it wasn't until I quit that I realized, I mean, I knew it while I was in it, but once I got out of it, I realized how awful that industry is. And I'm realizing even when I'm even more farther removed from it in another country where they do not at all do that, okay. So first of all, before I get into any of this, please follow my Patreon. I have a live once a month. I have one tonight. This is Sunday, June 23rd. I think I'm going to publish this today. Go join my Patreon for that content. France, traveling, healing, writing, whatever. I have a lot of fun over there. There's even a free tier too for just keeping up with my stuff and get stuff random. Anyway, so there's a few issues with tipping. One, it is constant schmegel harassment. It is like, that is a whole thing I'm going to talk about in a minute. The other thing is literally like it is like harder than being a performer. As somebody who performed in New York and like for many years doing improv, and LA and still sometimes, and even here, I'm a storyteller. I perform. No matter how I'm feeling, I still have to do my job and be funny and do all this stuff. And I love what I do. But some days when I am sick or I'm just really not doing well, I still have to show up and play this part, right? Like journalist, storyteller, comedian, which is good because sometimes it takes me out of myself and like shifts the energy. But other days, I'm like, God, I just don't want to be funny. I don't want to have to be funny today. But it's just like any other job in the arts. If you're a singer, you have to go perform no matter what. If you're a teacher, you have to show up and be on. Like so many jobs are about performing, but very few jobs are about performing where everything is based on how much you eat from the person you're performing. And if you don't eat there, then you don't get paid. Like that waitressing is literally just performing, and it's also like a mild version of work. And don't say that as an insult to workers. I have so much respect for. I am saying is that even though it's not in our job description, it is part of our job, is to let men be disgusting to us, flirt with us in front of their wives and their daughters, to say the most unhinged things to us, to make us feel so gross and so demoralized. We just have to manipulate them into feeling good about themselves, or letting them think that we actually like them, so that they'll pay us. And it's this power dynamic that is so. I'm sorry, but I'm not getting paid. I mean, I get paid. You get paid $2.13 an hour in most states. And again, I'm going to get into all this in a minute. And so that person could literally just not pay you at all. If they just decide, you know what, she didn't flirt with me enough, I'm not paying on this, and I'll still get taxed, assuming you tip. And I still have to pay out. I have to tip out the staff in the kitchen and the hostess, and I have to tip out. I don't know. Most people will realize this, but when you wait tables, you are like losing at least 25% of what you make from tips to who you're tipping out, the busser, the kitchen staff. I have to tip the kitchen now. That became a new thing in the last like 10 years of my on and off again waiting table. I actually understand the mentality behind it, because the kitchen makes the same no matter what. So when they bust their butt, maybe they should get a little bit more. But on days when it's slow and they're not doing anything, they still make money. And with days when it's slow, like I literally lose money sometimes by going to work. And I'll get into that in a minute. But you end up like I was trying to explain to my French friends last night. I was like, when you wait tables in the U.S., you literally have to perform, like you have to stroke the ego of everybody. You have to, and I'm a white woman, so I only have to deal mostly with being insulted and dehumanized by men. But the more marginalized you are, more intersections you're at, the more abuse you have to take, and just eat it. And then you still don't make as much money. I remember my dad literally telling me when I was like a teenager and we were at a restaurant that men probably, he was like, I'm sure men make more tips than women, or he said something like that. And I was like, why would you say that? He's like, because if a man wants to be served by a woman, he'll just stay home. That's assuming a man, has a woman at home, like as a wife or a sister or mom or something. But some of these, like, they're probably going out to restaurants, just so they can harass. And as we saw, and Cecilia Regina, my mutual, did a great video on this, and that coffee woman who like took the hammer out and like to that guy who just threw coffee at her and whatever. Her point with that story was that a lot of these men they use service workers as a way to abuse women, insult women, harass women, maybe because they don't have someone at home, and that we need to be more on guard and fight back, right? It's not that men are getting more violent, they just don't have as much access to women to take that violence on behind closed doors. So I wouldn't be surprised if service workers, especially women and femmes, are the first line of that attack, right? But yeah, he was like, it's more demoralizing for a man to be a waiter, for a man to wait on another man. So that man's gonna like pay him more, being like, yeah, that must have been hard for you, bro. Whereas if a woman serves him, they're like, whatever, this is like what I expect you to do anyway. But if you flirt with them, then they'll pay you more, because then they kind of see you more as like a schmex worker, kind of, right? Whereas if I go to a restaurant here, that person is not like, they're like, not always, sometimes they're just jerks no matter what. That person is usually civil. But they're like not that concerned. They'll check on me every once in a while, but they're not hovering over my table like we're supposed to with people in the US, because if we're not hovering, then they think that we're ignoring them. We also have to hover because we want to hurry them out, right? Because we need turnover. This is real estate, baby. And if you are not buying a bunch of food and you're just sitting here for hours, I'm going to really not like you. And it's not, you can be the nicest person in the world, but unless you're going to pay for the tips that I'm losing by you just sitting here, and we call them, camping. We got another camper at table 12 or whatever. Then it's like that person is literally, it feels like they're stealing money from you, even though they're just going out to have a good time, but they don't understand how messed up the service industry is. And so when you come to a restaurant here, it is totally fine if you stay for 2 hours, 3 hours. Like, the only thing that they don't like is if they're trying to close, because labor is a big issue here, and they're like, you're not making me stay after closing. Here, they would never let someone come in at 5 till 10 when the restaurant's closing and let you eat a whole meal. They're not keeping their whole staff there for you. The customer is not always right here. In fact, they will always, not always, but in my experience, they will prioritize the rights of the worker over making money any day. One of my favorite places to go during like a few days before Christmas had all these events, but no one was there, and we showed up and they're like, yeah, we just sent everyone home. We don't want to pay for electricity to keep this place open, pay for our staff. No one's even here. It's not worth it. It's like people, like in France, people, even if they just do what they want. If they're going on vacation for 2 weeks, they just have to put a note on the door, gone for 2 weeks. See you in September, They do not, like, there's no rule. Like, they don't stay open no matter what. If it doesn't make sense, they're not making the workers stay there. They're not going to, it's like, whereas in the U.S., they'll stay open forever, even if there's no one there. The customer's always right. What if that customer writes a bad Yelp review? the restaurant wasn't even in it. It gives so much power to the customer. It's not like Uber, one of these other ones where the driver gets to rate the customer and the customer gets to rate the driver. I'm pretty sure that's still how it works. No, I don't get to rate the customer. The customer gets to rate me. I almost got fired over a bad Yelp review because I water shamed a table because they wanted all these waters even though only one person wanted it. It was like total power move. And I was like, does everyone want water? So because of this one customer, this dude has a 10 top, and this is in LA, okay? Water shortage. Like at that point, we didn't just give water anyway. We gave water to people who wanted water. So he's like, water's all around. I'm like, oh my God, just like a 10 top. For me, that is literally going to take like 7 minutes for me to go all the way and get, and my wrists by then were hurting so bad. And I was like, okay. And I was like, so everyone here wants water? And he's like, yeah. And some of them were like, I want water. And he's like, they all want water. So anyway, he wrote up a passive, not even passive aggressive. That's more like what like white women do on Yelp. White women, God, yeah, it was great. And then they, instead of actually saying, you gave me the wrong food, a lot of women who look like me, instead of literally just because of fear of conflict, open conflict, or just saying what you mean, be like, no, it's fine. It's fine. And I'll be like, are you sure? Because I can sense something's wrong. And I speak Southern white woman, which is always like 7 different versions of no, but they won't say no, 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 it's fine. Are you sure? Yeah. And I'm like, what is wrong? Because I know something's up. And then sure enough, a Yelp review will come in later that day being like, my server gave me the wrong thing and they didn't. It's like, dude, you didn't tell me. I asked you, right? But anyway, this one dude almost, I literally got pulled into the manager's office and was like, she says you water shamed you, and so I have to defend myself. Luckily, that manager was great, but the whole company was owned by the worst human beings, these rich dudes. So, restaurants usually, unless they are owned by somebody who's not like selfish, hyper-capitalist kind of person, they usually take the side of the customer always, because Yelp has given the power to people. They already had too much power with tipping, and now Yelp has given all the passive-aggressive people, or all of the former nerds in school or former bullies in school, whichever, who are like, you know what, I'm going to take out all my issues on this service worker who makes $2.13 an hour, depending on what state you're in. Only 7 states actually pay the minimum wage. All the other ones, it's $2.13 an hour. Still, that's what I made in high school. I am 46. When I was waiting tables when I was 17, I made $2.13 an hour at Ruby Tuesdays in Nashville. It is and I'm going to get into the history of this in a minute, but the fact that people have so much power, but there's no consequence for them. One of my friends was a bartender at the restaurant I worked at in LA, and she said one guy would come up there and he put $100 bill on the counter, being like, "This is your tip." And every time she ignored him, he would take that off and replace it with 90. So he basically was all a power move. All these people who desperately want to power and control someone, if they have nowhere else to go, they'll go to a restaurant or somewhere with a service worker. A service worker will be forced to submit to them. And then it's also, these restaurants are full of all of these lonely old men who hate their families, or their family were left by their families. I can't tell you how many women. We all had this one dude at this barbecue restaurant. I will not say his name in case for some reason he is watching this or they're watching this. We all wanted to wait on this dude because he had money. He went in there. He literally was there every day and would hang out in the same seat. And then he'd just flirt with all the waitresses. But we always got 40% tips from him. And even if he didn't order much, boom, 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 he was buying our affection and our attention. Tell me that is not work. Because, whatever. We're not friends with this dude. We're not going to hang out with him outside of work. We literally only hang out with him at work, but he thinks that he is a part of the club because he pays people to hang. This is why I'm the whole lonely man card. My dad hung out at O'Charlie's all the time. The whole staff knew him there. Because his wife traveled a lot, and so whenever he didn't want to hang out by himself, right? So men do this all the time. They go to restaurants, they sit at the bar, they sit at their special seat, little king baby throne at a restaurant, and basically pay people to talk to them. Those people almost always being women, especially if they're cishet men. And so we end up being therapists, sex workers, life coaches, and all kinds of things to people that we are not getting paid that well by. Occasionally we are getting tipped okay, but for what we're doing, it's at a level of emotional labor that is grossly underpaid, in addition to the actual physical labor and the demoralizing nature of the job. Because for you to go into a job every single day, and just because I'm giving your food, like, it's this attitude. Like, this attitude to customers in the US, because I am serving you, it gives you a sense of power. Like, you are better than at least me, if no one else. Whereas here, you do not feel that from the servers. They will not tolerate that. They're just like, this is a job. They do not kiss your butt. They will not, you are never right. I mean, y'all remember that case in Canada a while ago where the French dude was waiting tables in Canada? I think they fired him or something for being rude. I forget the whole case. I'm not going to look it up in the middle of this video. And he literally tried to sue them for discrimination against French culture. I was like, oh my God, that's the most French story ever. He's like, how can you discriminate against this? Being rude to customers is part of my culture, you know? And so anyway, every time I go to a restaurant here and I see the servers not kissing my butt, not kissing anyone's butt. And, you know, I mean, I don't want to be treated like crap here. Like, I don't want to be completely ignored if I need something. But at the same time, my little waitress heart feels a sense of justice here, because I'm like, this is what servers deserve. A livable wage that is not dependent on the kindness of strangers. Usually when that kindness has a price, especially for men, because everything is transactional with men. So they'll give you a good tip, but it comes with a price. And a lot of times they're going to triangulate you against their wife, you know, and we'll hope on your behalf that she's not paying, because she will punish you for what he did to you. So here, you go to a restaurant, usually they have only 2 seatings a lot of times, if it's a night, because they know someone may eat earlier and someone will come in a little later, but it's not just like free for all whenever, because you're allowed to stay, right? And you don't have somebody just like hovering over. Are you okay? Do you need anything now? And, like, it's so annoying when you wait tables and you're like, okay, I gotta check, or you're like, you know, and they're whatever. Whereas here, they're just like, they'll come around every once in a while, and if you really need them, you like signal them, but they leave you alone. People come here to enjoy food, not to be worshipped, not to have someone submit to them. They go out to eat to enjoy food, because eating out is about food. It's not about a hierarchy. And everything in the U.S. is about a hierarchy. And why would it not be? When the entire foundation of our country, literally the foundation, is genocide and chattel slavery. Like, when that is your beginning point, and then it just keeps getting, you know, and then every change is still trying to go back to that. Everything's just going to stay about hierarchy, which honestly, one of my biggest lessons in my work around feminism is that it's all connected, and as long as I am attached to the sense of hierarchy, whether it's patriarchy, white supremacy, capitalism, all the things that I was taught, as long as hierarchy is my mindset, I'm not going to get anywhere. No, as competition versus cooperation and collaboration, not that competition is always bad, but in the US, everything is it's all about competition and individualism, because that's the socioeconomic culture. There's no paid vacation, there's no health care, there's no paid sick leave, there's no maternity leave, there's no paternity leave, there's none of that stuff. No social networks. You have to be in the rat race to survive. Anyway, the power trip that customers get in the US is just bleh, and you don't get that here. If you're in fact, the waiters have all the power on some level, but not like in like a gross way. But I love it. So let's get into the history of this, because just like healthcare, the reason why people in the U.S. do not have universal healthcare, racism, particularly anti-blackness, literally all roads lead to Rome. Seriously, if I learned nothing else from my history degree, it's like, oh wow, okay, that is actually about racism. Everything leads back to that. Everything. So that's why I talk about it so much, is because it is in everything. It is the air we breathe, just like patriarchy, you know, and misogyny and all that stuff. It's the air we breathe. And if we don't deal with it all, we're not getting free from any of it. So what exactly am I talking about? And I'm not just making this up. Okay, the New York Times did a story on this. So, I mean, a lot of things that media won't necessarily talk about, you just have to find it in books and you know, following, you know, scholars and activists. New York Times, okay? They're finally talking about it in the New York Times, even though this was like from 3 years ago. Tipping is the legacy of slavery. So the author of this is Michelle Alexander, civil rights advocate, and author of The New Jim Crow. If you haven't heard of that book, go check it out. And I love the way she starts off this article. Because she, like me, used to be a waitress. And she talks about one of the reasons why sometimes, like waitresses or servers, how servers a lot of times are resistant to this change. Because especially if you can make really good money as a server. But in general, it's just, okay, before I get into the bad stuff, I love this. Me too. She said, tipping, in my view, was a means for a customer to show gratitude and reward a job well done. Yep. If I wanted to earn more as a restaurant worker, that I needed to hustle more, put more effort into my demeanor, and be a bit more charming. Collecting tips gave me a certain satisfaction. Each time someone left me a big tip, anything more than I expected, a tiny jolt of dopamine flooded my brain as though I had just hit a mini jackpot. So relatable. I got 7 people stiff me and walking out and leaving nothing or just pennies, a true insult. But whenever that happened, I remind myself that I might get lucky next time, or I would do better somehow. And it's almost like, I swear, it's like it feels like being a gambler. Yeah, like every table you go up to, like, all right, like, it's like being a professional gambler, but that's your job and you have no other choice. But you could do the best job serving a table and they still give you like 5%, right? And it's so demoralizing. But then you get like a huge tip from someone else and then you're like, oh, it makes up for it. So it's always this like constant emotional roller coaster. And it's so hard to not take this stuff personally. Never did it occur to me that it was fundamentally unjust for me to earn less than minimum wage and to depend on the goodwill of strangers in order to earn what was guaranteed by law to most workers. I had no idea that tipping was a legacy of slavery, or that racism and sexism had operated to keep women, especially black women like me, shut out of federal protections for wage labor. I did not question tipping as a practice, though looking back, I see I should have. So then she tells this story of how she also had to navigate this world as a black woman and having like white customers who were like unruly or rude. And so her and her server friend, who was white, would kind of like, they'd be like, all right, you take them or whatever. And we did that too in our restaurant. A lot of times I would negotiate whether it was about like a rowdy group that because of like a possible like racism or possible sexism, like you would always be like, okay, we would negotiate who takes who and who would best handle who, whatever. Because these people can make your life miserable when you wait on, because not only they'd be unruly and just demanding and so hard, they could also leave a Yelp review, they could go talk to your manager or whatever, and they will impact your ability to serve all the other customers, because you usually have like, I don't know, 5 to 12 tables, depending on the type of restaurant. So one table could literally sabotage all your tips on some level. So yeah, they had this like kind of a joke between them. They wink, whatever, being like, you take them. Except that it wasn't funny. The risk that my race, not the quality of my work, would determine how much I was paid for my service was ever present. So again, even though I have never experienced this aspect of it, so again, just dealing with sexism alone, the job was like miserable. So if you double that or triple that by what racism brings in addition to that, or any of the isms, like, oh God. It is so vulnerable to be a server. And not just a server, y'all. Retail, anything where you're dealing with the public, but there's something about being a server where your tips rely on people liking you, even if they are bigoted, even if they're misogynistic, if they're racist, like no matter what or just they're awful people, you still have to like convince them to like you enough to pay you. And putting someone in that position is so wrong. So was the risk that I would be punished for not flirting with the men I served. Men of all ages commented on my looks, asked me if I had a boyfriend, slipped me their phone numbers, and expected me to laugh along with their sexist jokes. Not even just with their sexist jokes, just laugh at their dumb jokes. It's like, oh my God, my dad, every time we go out to a restaurant, he did the same, I don't know, it's like Benny something, some old dude, I don't know, some old show where when they got the ticket, they'd throw it in the air because it was so hot from being expensive. He did that every single time we went out, if he had a female server. And then they always be like, ha, and just like, I've like laughed at my dad's dumb jokes for a long time until I decided I'm not doing it anymore. But watching women being paid to laugh at his jokes, I was like, oh my God. I often played along after learning from experience that the price of resistance would be the loss of tips that I had rightfully earned. Exactly. That is what's so hard about being a server, is being like, oh my God, I have to, and this is somewhat relatable in all jobs, like how you always have to like end up kissing your boss's butt and all this stuff. There's just something about like the public at large being your boss and also paying you, right? Your boss could think you're amazing, but if your boss, the public, every table is your boss on some level, and them liking you is what they're like, I'm not going to pay you today because I just don't want to. Like, that dynamic is so messed up. And the fact that in the US now, because they also just don't want to pay workers, so like everywhere you're expected to tip, counter service everywhere, like literally everywhere, they are putting this on the public to pay their workers. Like, it is out of control. It's so much worse than it used to be. Everything's about tipping now, so they don't have to pay their workers. And then they make us feel guilty because the workers are now expect us to pay them, and it's like, well, that doesn't seem fair, but I also don't want to screw them over. It's so messed up. It like pits us, it like triangulates the server against, I don't know if that's the right word, against the public, when really it's like the owner, narcissist. I mean, like, whatever. I'm not, sorry, I don't want to use the word narcissist, but you know what I mean? It's the classic triangulation that comes in any like abusive situation, where the person who's actually causing the harm is just left out of the equation. And then, like, if you got an abusive dad, you got the two siblings fighting each other. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, this is a bad metaphor, but whatever. The truth was, though, that I was shielded from the biggest risk that tipped workers face, not being able to make ends meet. During the summers I spent waitressing, I was living in a home with my parents and had basic needs taken care of. On days when business was slow and only a few customers trickled in, I was reminded that my situation was not the norm. I remember coworkers crying at the end of the shift because she hadn't earned enough in tips to pay the babysitter. This right here. I thought my situation, like, I was completely dependent on tips to pay my rent. So every month I was like, can I pay my rent? 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 And you also don't get any paid days off. So if you take a day off to being sick, or to do anything, to go visit a friend, to take a vacation, you literally just lose money. But I realized the single moms that I worked with, I always was like, when I could, I'd like let them stay if someone had to be cut, because sometimes they'll let someone go home, so at least they're not wasting their time sitting around. If they wanted to stay, I was like, well, whatever, I can afford to lose a shift, but I know they have a kid who needs to be fed. You know what I mean? So it's so much more dire for people who barely make their ends meet, and especially if they have children, counting on them bringing home those tips. And I think when people go to eat, they don't think, well, I don't like this waitress. She wasn't good. So I'm just not. You're literally taking food out of their kids' mouths, but they don't see it that way. But it's not even their fault. It's the owner's fault. But it's not even the owner's fault necessarily, because the tipping culture is the thing. We'll get into who's really at fault in a minute. By the way, if you've made it this far, go bang, 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 bang. Because I don't know if anyone's even watching this far. I don't know if I should make longer content like this. So if you made it this far, just let me know. Bang, 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 bang. Anyway, I remember a few of us pooling our tips so another coworker could buy groceries on her way home and feed her kids. So then she talks about how after she graduated from law school, became a civil rights lawyer, began representing victims of race and gender discrimination in employment, as well as victims of racial profiling and police violence. She started to catch on to, that there was something tied to all this, but then it was this book, and I actually need to read this book. I have not read this book. When she read the book, Forked, A New Standard for American Dining, all the dots were connected. Because, again, this is why I love history, and this is why we really need to know, history is so, and whose history? Because the history I learned in the South, as a white girl in the South, going to public school, thanks to the Daughters of the Confederacy, those rich white women who changed history by changing the curriculum, which is what they're still trying to do now, and are doing by banning books, particular books. They're literally trying to get people, but especially white people, disconnected from our history of what we've done, so we don't feel bad, but also so that we don't unite with everyone else to fight against the people who are screwing everybody, which is a few rich white people. Sorry, mostly rich white dudes. But this is so important. In the United States, after Civil War, white business owners, still eager to find ways to steal black labor, created the idea that tips would replace wages. So, did you hear that? This is what it was always about. It always comes down to money. Like all the isms always come down to money, too. Exploitation of labor or depriving people of resources, hoarding resources. Tipping had originated in Europe as a noblesse oblige. What is this, French? Okay, sorry. Whatever. A practice among aristocrats to show favor to servants. But when the idea came to the United States, and again, I'm not saying that the U.S. is necessarily any worse than any other place, but I am saying that everything is more intense there. Everything is more intense there. It's like everything, especially like the stuff that's really bad, it feels like it's on speed or something. Of course, in the U.S., they're like, oh, let's take this. So the restaurant corporations mutated the idea of tips from being bonuses provided by aristocrats to their inferiors to becoming the only source of income for black workers they did not want to pay. Now, the Pullman Company tried to get away with it too, but the black porters, under the leadership of A. Philip Randolph, formed the nation's first black union to be affiliated with the American Federation of Labor and fought and won higher wages with tips on top. See that? Tips on top. Restaurant workers, however, who were mostly women, were not so fortunate. The unjust concept of tips as wages remained in place for them. And in 1938, when FDR signed the nation's first minimum wage law into law, it excluded restaurant workers as a category that included a disproportionate number of black people. And then again, in 1966, when our nation's minimum wage was overhauled, restaurant workers were even more formally cut out of the creation of submission wage for tipped workers. So here's the thing, like I was saying today, 43 states, now this was written a few years ago, so it may not be up to date. 43 states and the federal government still persists with this legacy of slavery, allowing a tipped workforce that is close to 70% female and disproportionately black and brown women to be paid submission wage. I love that. A submission wage. I love it when there are words put to something. This is one reason why I love being a writer and storyteller. When you have a language to talk about something, it's like, yeah, that's what it is. Submission wage. A nation that once enslaved black people and declared them legally 3/5 of a person now pays many of their descendants less than a third of the minimum wage. Let that sink in. To which everyone else is entitled. The submission wage for tip workers isn't simply born of racial injustice. It continues to perpetuate both race and gender inequity today. In the mid-1960s, the guaranteed wage tip for workers was $0 an hour. $0 an hour. Today, the federal minimum wage for tip workers is just $2.13. This is so bonkers. I did not realize till I read this article that it's still $2.13. $2.13. And just over a $2 increase, and mostly female. Disproportionately women of color workforce of tip workers still faces the highest levels of harassment of any industry. Women restaurant workers in states with submission wage report twice the rate of sexual harassment as women working in the restaurants in the 7 states that have enacted one fair wage, a full minimum wage with tips on top. So this is what we actually had. So my last waitressing job was in California. So that was actually a state that had this. So I can only imagine how much worse it is. I mean, I used to wait tables in states that did not have this, like Tennessee and other places. But I was also like younger, so I probably was harassed more than I even realized because I was like, oh well, this is just normal. But you know, when I was in my mid to late 30s waiting tables in California, I was like, God, this is so messed up. And I was in one of these states. Now, did I see any of that minimum wage? No, like what I took home, my checks were for like $10 or $50 or something because, you know, you have to claim your tips. And you have to claim, you know, like legally so you don't get in trouble. Like I think you have to claim a certain percentage of your sales as what they assumed you tipped. Now they try to put, you know, cushion it in there that not everyone tips you that much. So maybe on days you make more, then you're going to take home more without having to pay taxes. But on days that you make less, you're paying taxes on tips you didn't even make. So you're supposed to just claim a certain percent all the time. I don't remember if they made you do that, but I'm pretty sure we were supposed to do that. But then on top of that, we were also tipping out. You know, the same way a lot of times people are like, oh my God, actors and stuff like make so much money. And yes, some of them do. But please listen, people, all of writers, actors, anyone, they still pay taxes on what they make as a whole, even though they are paying a publicist, if they have one, if they're big enough, their literary agent, their agents take like 10, 15 or more percent. They're paying a whole team, right? So whatever you think they're making like half of that because of taxes, thinking they're making more, and then they're paying out other people. Anyway, so even in a state like California where I was working that we actually got this, it was still treated like crap. So I can't even imagine what servers are going through in states that don't have this. So it's California, Oregon, Washington, Nevada, Montana, Minnesota, and Alaska. They can rely on a wage from their employer and are not as dependent on tips, thus empowered to reject the harassment from a customer. Now, the reason why my checks were so low is because the sales are very high, so I was having to claim a lot, so they were taking a ton of taxes out of my wage. So I was never making like negative anything, but I was basically got like no paycheck, more or less, or just like a very small one. They would never have paid any of my bills, really. The unfair power dynamic between women tipped workers and male customers in most states has only worsened during the pandemic. I can only imagine women restaurant workers reports being regularly subjected to masculine harassment, which male customers are demanding that women servers take off their masks. Oh, so they can judge their looks and their tips on that basis. That is so gross. Did any of y'all who follow me, are any of you servers? Were you dealing with this? I did not know that. I mean, this doesn't surprise me at all. But I did not know that this was like, oh my god. With tips now down 50 to 70, what? With tips now down 50 to 75%, male customers know women workers are more desperate than ever. Oh my god. For Black women, the situation is especially dire. Before the pandemic, Black women who were tipped restaurant workers earned an average nearly $5 an hour less than their white male counterparts nationwide, largely because they are segregated into more casual restaurants, boom, 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 right there, in which they are far less in tips than white men who more often work in fine dining. See, that goes back to what my dad said. I have noticed that at like fine dining, like the restaurant that I worked at a ribs place, but it was like gourmet ribs. So it wasn't fine dining, but they were like trying to kind of be fine dining. And almost half of our staff was men, right? And the fancier the restaurant is, the more men you're going to see waiting, because that is the ultimate power play, is for a man to go somewhere and have a man wait on him, right? Especially a white man. A white man wait on him and kiss his butt. Oh, that makes the other white man feel so powerful. But also because of the customer bias in tipping. With the pandemic, these inequities were exacerbated. Nearly 9 in 10 Black tip workers reported that their tips decreased by half or more compared to 70% of workers overall. And this is all while they're asked to do more for less, enforcing social distancing, mask rules on top of servers. I can't believe anyone. I felt so bad for servers I felt so bad for hospital workers, servers, like, oh my god, all like the frontline workers that everyone was like, well, they're doing so much, and then even though we're still dealing with COVID, it's like everyone just forgot to care or appreciate. But it's just like the appreciation is so conditional, right? Or it's temporary. So okay, Black workers are more likely to be punished by hostile customers for attempting to serve as public health marshals than other workers. 73% of Black workers reported that their tips decreased due to enforcing COVID-19. Exactly. You know what they do on planes. We have remember all the footage of all the people being unhinged on planes, and like they really had to duct tape a dude to his seat. People are going crazy on planes. People are going to take out and they're going to record people on planes. Do you know how much this is probably happening in restaurants that was never recorded because it's probably so frequent? In planes, it's just like the stakes are so high on a plane because you're literally trapped with these people, right? Anyway, compared to 60% of all workers. See, this part I did not know. Technically, federal law requires that employers must cover the difference when the hourly wage subsidized by tips does not amount to $7.25 an hour. But in practice, that mandate is frequently exactly. This has never been a thing. I don't ever remember in all my waitressing jobs a boss ever being like, did you make enough for a minute? Never. That was never done. I'm sure this never happened. A federal review of employment records from 2010 revealed that nearly 84% of full-service restaurants had committed wage and hour violations. Shocker. You know, they actually still do that here in France because, like, events and stuff, they don't have to play within the same, like, union rules because whatever. Anyway, so it's not just the U.S., but anyway, God, I hate the restaurant industry so much, y'all. So I don't know if this thing passed or not, but they're trying to get this this fair wage thing for all the states. So this is a really interesting part. Workers in the 7 states that have the one fair wage receive similar or even higher tips as the workers in the 43 states with submission wage. And restaurants in those 7 states have higher. Huh. Interesting. It's almost as if people will act like they respect workers and people in general less when the government and their employers treat them like crap. I don't know. Here is the main culprit here. The National Restaurant Association. I swear to God. There is always some lobby in the pockets of Congress. You know, there's always some lobbyist, that's why, all of our, like, every time people over here are like, why are y'all so crazy about pew-pews? I'm like, lobbying. Like, literally a small group of people pay off like, everything comes down to a small group of, like, corrupt, greedy people, like the National Restaurant Association has wasted no time and launched a campaign to convince Congress to. I don't know the update on this. I'm guessing that they were successful because, as far as I know, things have not changed. But maybe I'm wrong. Let me know. Sorry, this is already a very long video. Let me know if you got this far. Go la 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 la, because I really don't think anyone's listening at this point. But maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. They're trying to maintain the submission wage for tipped workers and the low minimum wage. Of course they are. This move hardly comes as a surprise. For more than 100, so here we go back to history right here. For more than 150 years since emancipation, the restaurant industry has poured millions of dollars into lobbying elected officials to maintain their exemption from having to pay their workers a fair wage, causing tens of millions of women and men to experience poverty, food insecurity, home insecurity, and inequality over generations. So here's what it comes down to. Will policymakers continue to perpetuate the legacy of slavery? And again, this is why, like, people who look like me, really, like women who look like me, who follow my work, this is all connected. The more you start studying and finding out history, and the more we really truly realize that nobody is free until everyone is free. And whoever's in power is doing to one group of people, they're going to do to everybody. So we can't not care. So you have to care about service workers. You have to care about everyone, every intersection. You have to care about all of it. This is a team sport. Okay? Individualist mindset, hierarchy, bad for everybody, except for a few of these dudes at the top. And go back to what I said in several videos. If you go to a restaurant and you date men and they treat their server like crap, you are next. You are next. If that man will dehumanize a woman, it's probably a woman too. He will dehumanize a woman he doesn't even know, who's literally getting paid to be nice to him. You are going to be her one day. You will. Pay close attention to how men and everybody treats people they have power over, because that mindset will play out all over the place. Anyway, be careful out there. Go check out those books, by the way. And join my Patreon if you're already on there. And again, if you can't afford one of the tiers, just join just so I can, because the algorithm basically is the only reason why you see my stuff. And sometimes the algorithm doesn't like me. So if you want to see my stuff, hit notifications, but really follow Patreon, because you will get notified whenever I do a video. So if, like on TikTok, I'm shadow banned since October, but some, YouTube, my views are down, but it's also the summer and all my mutuals are experiencing that. So if you really want to see my stuff, go to the Patreon, the link is in the caption. Also just so, just a way of saying, hey, I support your work or whatever. Anyway, come to the live tonight with Leslie. We're going to talk about relationships with siblings, especially if one of them has special needs. Talk about raising teenage boys to be feminists. We're going to talk about community building. We're going to talk about all kinds of cool stuff. I can't wait. Anyway, Like, comment, share, do all this stuff. Let me know if you made it to the end, and have a great day, or a day that's bearable, whatever. Thank you for listening, and here comes the comment song. This is the comment song. I'm a little down because I realized my mic wasn't working. I'm sorry. There's no comment song right now. I'm really sorry that my mic, I got a new mic and it didn't work, or it's not working anyway, whatever. Okay, so you have a little bit more time to write a comment. You're running out of time. Here you go. Wrap it up. Okay, bye. Thanks for listening. Et voilà.